Welcome, sports fans. I'm Craig Cortello.
And I'm Kyle Cortello.
And we are
the Italian sports guys.
Bada-Boom.
Bada-Bing.
Leave the gun.
Take the cannolis you hear.
This is a weekly sports talk show with an Italian New Orleans twist, so grab a beer or a little red vino.
Some pizza pie or some pasta marinara you hear.
Throw on your favorite sports jersey.
And join us. What are you?
All right, Kyle, good to be back here with the ISG Nation, with the Brian Scheckstein State Farm Sports Recap Show. And especially good to be here after a win, Kyle, maybe a historic win. I know before the game you predicted a 27-24 win for the Saints. I think most people thought it'd be kind of that duke it out kind of a ball game, go down to the wire, two really good teams. What do you think happened here? What was the keys here that made us run away with this game, something nobody expected?
I think it was a few things, Craig. I think from an emotional standpoint, I think the Saints were a little bit tired of hearing about how great the Buccaneers were when we had beaten them once and were already within striking distance of them, just a half game behind. I think from an X's and O's standpoint, I think the Saints had a much better game plan. Bruce Arians will be the first one to tell you he clearly got out coached on Sunday night. And I think it was also the Saints coming together, really coming together, putting it all together for the first time this season. Early on, they talked about the Saints coming into the season with a perceived advantage because of the cohesiveness, because we had been together for so long, because we had such little roster turnover, and the way that everything was done in such a precise manner. Well, there's a yin to that yang. You have to look at the fact that the Saints have thrived and prided themselves on precision, on working on such a precise and accurate manner, down to the inch on where they line up. All these things they do in camp every year, all these things Drew does in the offseason. They never got that chance to do those things. So what many perceived, including me, to be a plus coming into the season turned into be something maybe where we needed a lot of time to get ourselves together, because the team we saw early in the season won a few close games, looked nothing like the team we saw Sunday night. So I think it could be the Saints really putting it together from a repetition standpoint.
Yeah, and to that point, I think, a couple of things there. Number one, Bruce Arians is always doing as the kind of guy, maybe he's a little bit loose, maybe not attention to detail that, say, a Belichick or a Sean Payton has. Maybe as the season goes on, you're starting to see that play out. Maybe the Saints catching up to that and getting to their form, and Tampa Bay not really paying attention to the details. But I think when you talk about precision, I think there you look at the return of Mike Thomas and also getting all the healthy wide receivers back. Even though Thomas's stats weren't huge, you look at so many times, Drew, it takes his cues off of how they're playing Mike Thomas. That's a security blanket. He knows if you got him single coverage, he can go to him regardless of whether he's covered, and he plays off of that. If they overplay him double team, then he knows where the other options are.
Absolutely. We heard so much about the addition of Antonio Brown on the Buccaneers roster, and that he would be a fairly integral part of the game plan. Well, the Saints get back who I think is the best receiver in the NFL right now, top three, if not the best. Okay, so somebody's got to account for him on defense, and you usually got to, roll some additional coverage over to him because of the unique matchup problem he presents to just about every defense in the league. Also, the return of Emmanuel Sanders. Come on, and even Marquez Callaway. So a guy who's starting to become a little bit of part of that offense. So from that standpoint, absolutely. Just because Mike Thomas didn't catch 13 passes for 175 yards doesn't mean that he didn't create openings for other people. And by the way, he did make some pretty big catches as well, too.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, we knew, of course, though, offensively, this team had been, even without all their weapons, had been clicking and scoring points the last couple of weeks. But the real story of this game was defense, the way we shut them down. Historically bad game for Tom Brady, and historically bad in terms of point differential, every stat you can run through. What was it on the defensive side you saw that was really shocking to you?
I thought particularly the defensive line and overall the front seven beat the snot out of Tampa. We talked about, look, this isn't us as fans gloating over the victory and talking trash. We watched last year. We called ourselves out saying we weren't tough enough in a couple of key games, particularly against the Vikings, and it cost us our season, cost us a ball game, ended our season. You look at Sunday night, and the Saints beat up on both sides of the line of scrimmage, but we're talking defense here. With a nice rotation of players and fresh legs for four quarters. You saw when everybody's healthy, this defense can do when that defensive line performs. I thought Cam Jordan had one of his better games. Marcus Davenport is maybe becoming a player we all know he can be from a talent standpoint. Hendrickson has been good all year and had a couple of sacks and finally got some national headlines. third in the NFL in sacks. But the interior guys, Onyemata and Malcolm Brown, and even Roach coming in some, they look tough, man. And Tampa had no answer for him. Tampa was missing Ali Marpet, who's their starting guard, a third-year guy, I think, out of Hofstra. And he's one of their marquee guys on the O-line. Maybe he makes a difference, maybe not, but not in the ballgame, just in the fact that they'd have been a little bit more, given a little bit better protection to Brady and been able to establish the run. Of course, to do that, you have to run it more than 5 times.
Yeah. Well, you look at, again, that defensive line, such a key when you're playing Tom Brady, guys, a traditional pocket passer. We saw it in the Super Bowl losses to the Giants, right? If you can rush this guy with 4 guys and keep those 7 guys back, and that's a huge advantage to that team. And this is one of the first times I can remember in a while where I didn't feel like we had to pressure as much to get pressure on the quarterback. We didn't have to bring exotic blitzes. We did a few kind of wrinkles here and there, but as you mentioned, Marcus Davenport getting back, getting that consistent rush on the other side. And Hendrickson, before this game, it came up in conversation where Bruce Arians said, he's the easiest guy on the line to block. And I don't know if it was disparaging. Somebody threw something at him and he was talking about the other guys were better, but he must have got that back on the bulletin board because he played like a man possessed. At one point, he had 3 straight sacks, though one was called back. So as you mentioned, you mentioned, I think, on our text thread during the game, we got to him early and his eyes became focused on the line and not on downfield guys.
Yeah, he's great for like Drew, sliding out of the way and keeping your eyes on the receiver downfield, he being Tom Brady. And he started in the second half to look straight down, to look right in front of him. Who's coming to hit me now? Because we had 3 sacks, but we had pressure on him all night, and we hit him a bunch of times when we didn't sack him. And believe me, you start to feel that stuff. So,
yeah. A bit of a breakout game, too, for Taysom Hill. At times early in the season, it looked like bringing him in was ruining Drew's rhythm, and he didn't quite have the everything's down. We had a costly fumble early in our season, but he had a great game. Again, strategically, the packages where they used him, he had some big gains. They let him throw the ball a couple of times, which I think is great to keep these defenses honest as well. But he looked every bit the weapon that we like to have, that change of pace to quarterback.
When he's ear to ear, watch out because he's feeling it. When he's got that grin on his face, that look, he's in his own little zone. Now, I thought pure genius on Sean Payton and Pete Carmichael's part was the letting him throw the ball on the first third down. He came in, and put the pass to Jared Cook. I thought that really, really put Tampa's defense on their heels from that point on when he came in. And that's a tough matchup for any safety, much less any linebacker, even Devin White, on covering Jared Cook. And I thought that really opened some things up for the Taysom Hill packages that we were sending in.
Yeah, and Drew Brees, of course, was locked in from the get-go. I think he ended up 26 of 32. Had a huge passer rating, 135. Matter of fact, all of our guys were over 115. Brady, a 40.4 with 3 interceptions. This changes a lot in the narrative, both this division and the NFC, Kyle. And you look at Tampa, number 1. A couple of weeks ago, we were struggling, started 1 and 2. It looked like we may be playing for a wild card to play our way through the NFC. This flips things completely. We get the head-to-head sweep. And looking at Tampa's side, they got some things to work out. It's easy to look back now. They had some impressive wins against Green Bay, the Raiders, I believe. But you look back in retrospect, now look at these 2 losses, and a really bad one here. Now you look back at a Giants game they could have lost on a Monday night. There's some games that show some chinks in their armor. They lose to a Bears team that's been struggling. So the next couple of weeks, especially with the Antonio Brown thing in the mix, they got a lot to show the next couple of weeks. Could get ugly in Tampa if they don't. Absolutely.
Look, a story just broke that there's some type of additional suit being filed against Brown. I don't want to speak of it because I don't have all the details. Yeah. What does that do? Was that an element that maybe in a locker room isn't sitting well with the Mike Evanses of the world? Who knows? But it seemed like they were completely out of sorts the other night. Yeah. We're going to give the kid, the Antonio Brown player, I guess we'll give him the benefit of the doubt again to prove that he does understand. He said all the right things so far that, hey, this is my last shot, and BA being Bruce Arians took a chance on me, and I'm gonna prove him right. And that's good for the sake of humanity. You hope the kid figures that part out. But make no mistake about it, to your point, they have not looked the same in the last couple of weeks. We talked about this on our family thread, the Wisdom Mafia, that we had a feeling if you were going to watch things play out, everything was gaga. The media was gaga over the Tampa Bay and, Tampa Bay Tom and all that stuff and the Buccaneers and started immediately putting them in that echelon where they hadn't been in a long, long time. And we said they're going to come out of the gate pretty strong, and they're going to hit a point in the season and the truth's going to come out. I'm not by any means saying, look, they had a clunker. Every team's had one over the years, okay? But they had a real bad clunker at a time when you think the last thing you should worry about on Sunday Night Football against a division rival when you're fighting for the division lead is effort and execution. And both were paltry the other night on their side. Now, look, maybe it's the cleansing that they needed to quit reading their own headlines and get going on, get their mojo back, so to speak. If not, it's what we talked about. We'll see. I'm not ready to bury him yet or anything like that, but that was an incredible eye opener for everyone.
Yeah, this was a definite Sonny Corleone with the trash can knocking down Carlo in the streets, kind of a beatdown, without question. And
my sister again, I'll kill you.
That's right. Yeah, you mentioned again Brady kind of taking control of this show. At first you're going to defer to him because he's got the rings on his fingers and you don't, right? But the more he brings these guys in, if you're winning, that's going to go fine. If things start to turn south, there's a little bit of a dig to existing personnel when you start bringing in other guys, as if to say, I can't win with just you guys. I need some additional weapons here, So I thought particularly you look at that goal line stand. Saints had been horrible goal line defense, red zone defense, and Tampa had been really good. We stopped them 4 straight plays from the 2 or 1 yard line. And twice in that sequence, they tried fade routes to Mike Evans as almost if to say, let's try to appease this guy. It's almost like, they're trying to make too many guys happy. And that's a bad dynamic for a team.
Once you start listening to all the complaining, the squeaky wheel gets the grease mentality takes over, and everybody starts chirping. What did Brandon Cook say? Closed mouths don't get fed. Yeah. Well, he was right. He was also right we were also right that that'll get you run out of town when Sean Payton's in charge, and it did.
Yeah.
Look, what does this feel like to Chris Godwin and Mike Evans when they hear all the hubbub about Antonio Brown when they've been playing some pretty good ball leading up to that point?
Yeah.
So that brings up, that's a very interesting question to see how this plays out in their locker room,
Yeah. Yeah, and again,
Tigers don't change their stripes a whole lot, so we'll see what this guy is,
Of course, as I mentioned, this kind of flips the narrative both in this division and NFC in general. You look at the Saints now being talked about as, again, not only a division winner and most likely, but also as a Super Bowl and NFC contender. So the real key here is, as Sean Payton always says, is don't eat the cheese. This is the first time we've really been elevated to that level in the national narrative.
First time we had a shot at cheese all season.
That's right. But I like the way this team's coming together, and we've got to, I don't think they'll overlook this next game the way we got beat last year by San Francisco. We got them coming in a little bit dinged up, so I think they're going to be focused on this game as well.
Absolutely. Look, the biggest mistake you can make, you want to, if you hit a birdie and you triple bogey the next hole, you kind of wipe that birdie out, don't you? And if you want to lessen the effectiveness of a dominant win for your team, throw out a clunker the next week. Don't show up. To your point, they better not eat the cheese. They're going to be in trouble because San Francisco, last year's NFC champion, is on life support as far as playoffs go this year. And so you're going to get everything they got going forward because they know the season's on the line every week.
Yeah. And I mentioned changing the narrative a bit. Another thing has transpired the last couple of weeks, and you look a couple of weeks back, we were 2-2 or 3-2. It really looked like a high hurdle to leapfrog a lot of these NFC teams, but a lot of those teams at the top have come down a little bit in the last few weeks. So I mentioned Chicago was 5-1 at one point, 3 straight losses there, and we've got the head-to-head win with them. Green Bay still looks solid, but they've had some shaky games. They were 4-0. They're 2-2 over the last 4. A big blowout loss to Tampa, and really a Minnesota loss a couple of weeks back that was puzzling. At home, they're not supposed to lose to that team. Seattle is 6-2, looking like a contender, but some defensive woes there. All 8 games this season, they've given up more than 23 points, 23 or more points, and scored 23 or more. So every game's a shootout. They've got some defensive issues there. And I mentioned San Francisco, again, the defending conference champion, 4-5 with a bunch of injuries, a lot of turmoil there, and Jimmy G may be on the outs there, so we'll see. So it puts the Saints again very much in a position to be to the class of this conference.
2 teams to watch out for going down the stretch, Greg: Arizona and Carolina. I'm not completely ready to shut the book on Carolina. A healthy Christian McCaffrey and I think a pretty good coaching staff, they can maybe at least upset the apple cart if they don't make the playoffs themselves. I know their record, some tough losses, but check their schedule going down the line. If you get an expanded playoff, like they're talking about. See what happens if they get into that little tournament. And Arizona, look, they were left for dead against Seattle, I believe, on a Sunday night game a few weeks ago. I turned it off, went to bed, and they came back and won that game. Now they lost the next week, I believe, to Miami. But watch out as they try to piece things together at Arizona as well. Two other teams, and the Rams too.
Yeah, I mean that kind of leads us into our good and the bad of the NFL last week. That was a spectacular game, but with featuring two of the future stars of this league. You mentioned Kyler Murray, 21 of 26, 283, and 3 touchdowns without a pick. He also ran for over 100 yards. Incredible game for him. Defense really let him down late in that game. But Tua was the story here too. I mean, the first game for Tua, a week ago with the Rams, it was hard to gauge him because it was kind of a strange game where they scored a bunch of defensive scores, so you didn't really know how effective he was. Saw some of the highlights last week: 20 of 28, 248, and 2 touchdowns. But even more impressively, there were a couple of runs he had where he juked some defenders, where he looked physically all the way back. It was really impressive. His agility.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's one of the guys the league could possibly be hanging their hat on. I think Murray is. I think Tua has a chance to get into that mix, But the future of the quarterback position is, obviously Mahomes is out in front of everyone else. Lamar Jackson, tremendous last year. A few question marks this year, but you figure Mahomes, Jackson, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, and Tua and Justin Herbert. Those are the guys that this league is going to be hanging their hat on for the next 10 years.
Yeah, you look at the other good teams. Buffalo, again, we talked about them, a solid team all the way around, 7-2. A good win against Seattle, got up big there and held on late, a little bit of a shootout. Miami, I mentioned Miami, they were 1-3, give them kudos. Now 4 straight wins to 5-3, very much in contention for a playoff spot. And, the changing of the guard to the young quarterback. But even if he has an issue or he gets injured, you still got a solid backup, a veteran backup to come back in. Kansas City, you mentioned Carolina. I said, I know it's the same thing, with McCaffrey coming back, it looks like a little bit of a different team. And they gave Kansas City all they could handle last week. That would have been a big, I think they maybe put themselves too far behind the 8 ball at 3-6, but that would have been a big win. They're a scary team, and they're not going to be an easy out next time we have to play them.
Yeah, look, I mean, it came down. We beat them by a yard, basically.
Yeah.
That field goal to tie it, was a yard short, and we had a big sack on the down before that to make that possible. So, that was the Saints rounding into form, but Carolina gave us all we could handle, and again, to go on, to go against Kansas City the way they did and stretch that one out on the road, I thought that was a tremendous performance, albeit in a loss. Just something to keep an eye on down the road, see where they go. But a good young roster, and I think they're a few pieces away from contending.
Yeah. I mentioned that our schedule after this week, it's kind of really starts to soften a bit, but you never know how this plays out. As we mentioned, Carolina looks to be on the upswing. Atlanta still got them twice. I still think Atlanta's very beatable, but they come back with a couple of wins of late. Minnesota's a team too. They were very underachieved the first several weeks of the season, but they've come up with a couple of nice wins the last few weeks. And they ran for 275 last week against Detroit. They just pounded that team. So some of those teams, even with losing records, could present a challenge. No time to let your guard down.
No, look, you go start with the Vikings. They don't have Everson Griffin this year. They traded him to Dallas or Detroit, I can't remember. And Daniil Hunter, the kid out of LSU, big-time pass rusher, who gave us fits in the playoffs. He's out possibly for the rest of the year. I can't remember. I know he's out. That's a real litmus test for this Saints offensive line, is to see how they perform against a team that took you to the woodshed last year, punched you in the mouth, and you didn't really respond.
Yeah.
So very interesting option to see the Saints in that situation. So what looked like to be the easier part of the schedule, you have a few teams who were kind of left for dead early on, kind of on a roll now, including the Falcons, who are starting to play a little better. Look, Falcons were, out of everything last year and put it on us pretty good here in the Dome.
Yeah.
And then we beat them pretty good, I believe. Was that Thanksgiving night? We put it on them pretty good, and all of a sudden, they 3 onside kicks later. They were made a ball game of that one as well. So
yeah.
Never sleep on a big rivalry game like that. They're going to show up, and they're playing with nothing to lose now. So and if they want to keep Raheem Morris as an option as the head coach, if the locker room's behind him, then you need to keep putting out that effort. So you're going to get a lot from them.
Yeah, and you look at, we mentioned Kansas City, 8-1 now. Just so many ways this team can beat you. I think they're still the favorite in the AFC, although Pittsburgh's an impressive 8-0 and a pretty complete team too. On the bad side, I started to list the Jets, but maybe that was the best move they could have made. I turned the game on Monday night when they were up 10 and said, wow, here we go. And they proceeded to give up 13 unanswered, 2 field goals and a touchdown and blow that game. But again, that puts them squarely in the mix for the top overall draft choice. What are you hearing, Kyle, though, with Trevor Lawrence? Is there some rumblings there he may not be so interested in the Jets?
Look, he's talked before about the possibility of coming back and playing for Clemson again. Basically saying it's not a foregone conclusion that I'm giving up my last year of eligibility. Yeah. I think he's crazy to not go to the Jets and take the money as a number 1 overall pick. Anything can happen. But look, I understand the organization is in absolute chaos right now. The Jets have no leadership from top to bottom whatsoever. But to be the number 1 overall pick and live in New York and play in New York, that can kind of do a lot for you from a figurehead standpoint, from a PR standpoint. Again, I guess they won't be wanting you to do any commercials if you continue to lose ball games, and they'll probably place all the blame on at your doorstep too. Something for him to look at. But look, I don't know of anybody who would not come out knowing they were the number 1 overall pick nowadays. There's just too much to lose. Look, Eli forced his way out of San Diego. Peyton did come back for his last year at Tennessee, different times a little bit, but maybe he tries to do something along those lines. I don't know.
Yeah, Elway said
Joe Burrow went to an organization in disarray in Cincinnati, and it was kind of the kick in the pants that needed to get them moving as an organization, and they're already a much better team,
Yeah, I understand, guys, that some franchises are bad, but, I've always had a lot of respect for guys who said, this team's bad. I'm going to put them on my shoulders and take them to the next level. I'll be part of this rebuilding process, whether it's Larry Bird or Jim Kelly, these guys that say, I'm going to be the franchise. I don't care how bad they've been in the past. It's a new day when I walk in the door. You got to respect that.
You completely have to respect it. It's a special type of player and a special type of person who says, no, give me that challenge. I want to go there and I want to win. Look, Drew Brees did it here when nobody knew what was going to come of this city. He said, no, it's part of the mission. Look, to be the number 1 overall pick and live in New York, there could be a lot worse things.
Yeah. We talked about NFL, the good. I'll talk about some of the bad. I mentioned the Jets. NFC East, of course, continues to wallow in sub-mediocrity. You got to give a bad to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after the performance the other night. Arizona defense, I mentioned, that was a big game for them, a competitive game and a real shootout. The defense really let them down late. They gave up a long drop, 10 plays, 93 yards, to let Miami come back and tie it, and gave up a game-winning field goal shortly thereafter. Detroit Lions always seem to be one of these teams you're waiting for them to make the next step to the next level, and they fought back from a 1-3 start to 3-3. Had a couple of games last couple of weeks you thought might be winnable. They gave up last week 275 yards to Minnesota. That's horrible defense there.
On the ground.
Yeah, the week before they got outrushed by Indianapolis 119-29. They continue to be kind of a soft team and don't seem to be really committed to the establishing sort of that physical presence.
It just keeps repeating itself in Detroit.
Yeah.
They hire a new coach, and he does okay. If he does okay, if he doesn't get him over the hump, they blame the coach and they get rid of him.
Yeah.
Okay. They fired Jim Caldwell after he went to the playoffs the year before, and almost went to the playoffs the next year, and they haven't been decent since. Do you keep having this revolving door of coach after coach after coach, or what's the real problem? Have they had a few different GMs? I don't know, but you have to put somebody in place to run that organization, from a leadership president of the organization or a GM president of the organization. Give him a few years to change the culture there, because that's the problem. I mean, now they expect to lose in the building, and their fan base expects them to win, and neither, the fan base isn't even close. You're not even close to being a winning team there. It looks like it sometimes, but they haven't turned the corner once.
Yeah. Kyle, elsewhere in the sports world, of course, we mentioned before the show, the Masters this week. Of course, a little bit of a caveat there to the change of the season with all the COVID disruption, but you kind of get those unusual, sporting events late in the year. I think there's going to be like 7 major championships in golf, and something like 13 months or something. So we mentioned before the show, and a -7, Paul Casey, right?
Paul Casey in the lead, -7 today.
Yep. And looking
And then,
to the,
go ahead.
yeah, and looking to the Tiger Woods -4. He had, I think, 4 consecutive birdies at one point in the game. Get round today.
Okay, Tiger Woods shot a 68, which ties his best ever opening round at Augusta, and had 0 bogeys today.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah. Elsewhere, we talked about LSU again. We've got another disruption there with COVID. Maybe a blessing in disguise. What are you hearing there for the Tigers, Kyle?
You know, a lot of this has to do with tracings and contacts and everything else. As much as you have some players testing positive, you have a lot more people put into this protocol, or whatever you want to call it, quarantine, because of the tracing thing.
Right.
And I mean, if you walk by somebody in the building who's had it within the next so many days, if you were within 6 feet of them at any time, technically by the rule, these guys have to quarantine, and LSU simply couldn't field the team.
Yeah.
And one scholarship quarterback who was going to be able to play in TJ Finley. Yes, I mean, if they get a chance to make this up later on in the year, great, do it. I still don't think they would beat Alabama, but the team they are right now and the team Alabama is right now, there is a chance it could have been frightening.
Yeah.
Okay, both healthy.
Yeah.
LSU without several more players, yeah, that could have been, you know, who wants to see that?
Yeah.
Bama gets nothing out of it, except Mac Jones maybe gets some more stats for a Heisman campaign. But no, you know, look, I'm sure Nick Saban would be the first to tell you he'd rather play LSU at some kind of full strength.
Yeah.
You know, and so let's see, maybe down the road they can make this one up, and maybe not. I don't think that there's really a date to do it, but playing that game would have done a lot for. Although I will tell, like I told the coworker who's an Alabama fan, you know, whatever, you know, we probably would have beat you again. We beat you last year running away till your late touchdown, and now I got scoreboard for another 12 months. So kiss off.
There you go. We retain the crown. We keep the crown if we don't play him this year.
Yeah, if there's no natty, I'll stay defending champ for 2 years. Look, LSU is 1 or 200 plays from turning this whole season around and going right back to the playoff.
Yeah, right. All right, Kyle, any other thoughts before we wrap up the show for this week? Again, Saints, San Francisco, we host them. Again, Saints 9.5-point favorite. A tough loss last year. One of the better games, other than the fact that we lost it last year, one more competitive. And that was one of those key games for San Francisco, looking back, kind of propelled them to a Super Bowl run, but not a win. But I think the Saints will be licking their chops after the way we lost that game last year.
Yeah, look, you know, you should have this one circled for sure if you're on the Saints roster last year. I know the fans will. I do want to ask you, going back in all the years that we've been following this team, the way we all follow them, do you recall a more dominant, important victory in a game? A dominant victory in an important game?
Yeah, I guess, you know, when you say important games, I mean, you have to go back and look at, you know, playoff games, but I don't recall. And you know, of course, we haven't really. I don't know that we dominated any postseason games to that extent. It's hard to. I mean, thinking about, you know, who we were playing. I mean, Drew Brees. There's no doubt he looks to these games head against Brady. He's 5-2 right now against Brady a lifetime. So all of that considered, you're playing on the road, you're playing against a division foe, one of the greatest of all time quarterbacks. A team, you know, and again, looking back at that first game of the season, you could give them a pass because it was his first game there. We got after him, but I thought maybe they just needed get some cohesiveness, offensive line, get their timing down. So to come in and do this kind of a beatdown, all those things considered, they had the time to prepare for this game and look at the Saints and say, what did we do wrong the first time? All those things considered, it's hard to gauge again, without going back through and looking at every game by game, as impressive as dominant performance by this team against a good team in a big spot. Again, the probabilities change from maybe 30-something% to 70-something% winning this division based on the probabilities post-game.
Yeah, absolutely huge. And my kind of answer would mirror that to a degree. You know, I recall the playoff win in 2009 over the divisional playoff win over Arizona, who I think the year before had gone to the Super Bowl and lost to Pittsburgh. To see that.
Yeah.
That was a dominant win. Reggie Bush had a tremendous game, and the Cardinals went up 7-0 on a Tim Hightower touchdown run, and the Saints blew the doors off of him from there on out.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know exactly what year it was, but it was a Jim Moore 1990-91 team beat a John Elway Denver Bronco team 42-0 in the Dome, I believe.
Remember that? I was there.
And that was Denver was in and out of Super Bowls all that time, weren't winning any of them, but Denver was always among the best in the AFC at the time, and the Saints absolutely crushed them. But with so much on the line, a division opponent, that people were starting to kind of crown and talk about, and for the Saints to put it on them the way they did, it's as good, if not better, than any big win in a big game that I can recall.
Yeah, I think you point out a good comparison game, though. I think that people forget with that Cardinals game. We lost the last three. Everybody talks about peaking late in the season. We had lost 3 straight coming into that one. Although with the last game we sat our guys, but we had that 13-0 run and then got that loss. It looked like it took a lot of the wind out of this team's sails, and we wondered if we could get it back to that level again. And Sean Payton, the master motivator, but that was a huge win because we didn't know what kind of team we were going to get coming out of the tunnel that day. So you're right. I think that one would certainly compare favorably to this one.
Sure. How about the national pundits? Every last one of them picking Tampa Bay.
Yeah,
and which is fine. I get that. A lot of times I'd rather them pick the other team. But did you see Mike Florio and Chris Sims not really own it?
Oh, really?
The Saints fans were giving this, and they started saying, it's not our fault Tampa didn't show up. No, own your poor pick, man. You made a bad call. You made a bad pick. How about giving credit to the Saints instead of saying Tampa didn't show up? My goodness.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, they had six on NBC, at least 4 on ESPN, and it was I think 4 or 5 on NFL Network. So yeah, they were over.
I would just like to hear how well the Saints played, or at least the Saints had a little something to do with it. That'd be nice to hear. Right. But you win them all and get the trophy, they can never take it away.
Yeah. Well, you like to say a lot of the narrative was how bad Tampa was, but that's beside the point. All right, Kyle, I want to mention our sponsors again real quick. Of course, Brian Checks, United State Farm Insurance right there on the Causeway in Metairie, and also Luca Eats.
7329 Cone Street, corner of Cone and Loreline, uptown. Breakfast and lunch 7 days a week. And my barging onto the scene from McDonough Marine Service, the barging onto the scene player of the week, Trey Hendrickson, Craig. Finally got his national exposure.
Yeah, and also you mentioned the Luca Eats. Just want to mention, great outdoor setting out there. Social distance. You go right up to the counter. You order on your phone ahead of time. Everything is one of the better places to eat right now. Great outdoor setting, and the weather's fantastic.
My parents are there every Sunday, every week.
There you go. All right, Kyle, we'll be on top of the game next week after we beat the San Francisco 49ers. We are
the Italian sports guys.
Bada-Boom.
Bada-Bing.